I won't ever let you down. You're a person, after all. And a person is a person, no matter how small.
Because one collab just wasn't enough, Chuck Jones and Seuss gave us another one 3 years later with Horton Hears a Who, with much but not quite all of the same team returning. As for if it holds up as well, that's hard to say. To those not in the know, Horton Hears a Who happens to also involve the town of Whoville, except here they're portrayed as a society of tiny people living on a microscopic speck. And Horton the elephant, being the only animal in the jungle of Newell able to hear them, is devoted to keeping them safe from harm. This proves difficult when everyone considers him delusional, and it's up to Whoville to make themselves heard by any means necessary to avoid certain death. As a follow-up to Grinch, I think this is a great choice of story, as it's quite similar in spirit if you think about it. Both stories tell a very straightforward plot, with a clever little allegory tying into a thoughtful philosophical message. This one obviously about isolationism and letting diverse voices be heard.
Remember, no matter how small, that a person is a person after all.
I wouldn't say it's as strong nor emotional on the base level. Honestly, it feels a little disjointed in places, but the passion is still very much there. It even does a great job at letting itself stand out from the earlier special, with a different environment and more lighthearted tone. What's interesting is that this actually took a lot of little deviations from the original book, and I mean beyond the musical numbers and such that pad out the runtime. The main antagonist, the sour kangaroo, was named Jane, and was given more of an active role in the story with a very posh kind of personality.
Something has got to be done about you, and something's precisely what I'm going to do.
The vulture Vlad Vladikov was renamed to
Whizzer McQuarf.
Did they think the original name sounded too scary or something?
Hidey-hi, hidey-ho, let us play hide and seek.
But most interestingly, the role that went to the mayor of Whoville has been replaced with this inventor named Old Doc Hoovy. I guess to justify the added subplot where the Whos at first don't believe the existence of an outside world. I mean, it certainly wouldn't be a good look for these guys to call their mayor an educated dope.
My dear, it's perfectly clear that the world is a sitting on an elephant's nose.
I can't say these additions add much in the grand scheme of things, but they don't feel out of place and are honestly integrated pretty seamlessly. But speaking of the musical numbers, that's where it starts to get a tad underwhelming. They're fine and still feel like Seuss, but you're not going to hear anything on the level of Mr. Grinch. They just tend to lack that distinct catchiness and memorability, and as such they quickly start to blend together. Some stand out for one reason or another, like the legendary June Foray gets to carry an entire sequence on her own with this little gossip number.
Mrs. Tupinella told me that he's manic and depressive, retrogressive and recessive, and progressively, excessively, possessively, aggressive.
And the Wickerson Brothers song is pretty great thanks to Throw Ravenscroft and the Metal Men adding so much menace to these characters.
We're the Wickerson Brothers. We're vigilant spotters. Hot shot spotters of rotters and plotters.
But even those are probably not going to keep in your head. There's also the animation. Now don't get me wrong, there are a handful of impressive bits still. And in general, it looks quite nice. Certainly looks better than the standards of the time at least. But you can tell a lot more shortcuts were taken this time around, which I'm assuming is because of a lower budget. This includes many scenes where the characters talk off screen to avoid mouth movement, as well as several bits getting blatantly recycled, including a few pulled from the Grinch. That, and there's a few scenes that, although brief, just don't look right, suggesting there wasn't a lot of room for retakes. But they're still doing their best. And while you aren't going to get anything on the level of the best scenes of the Grinch, you might as well like what they're seeing. Same goes for the voice acting. Hans Conried, who you may recognize as Captain Hook in Disney's Peter Pan, handles the lead roles with such a mellowness compared to Karloff that, although obviously not as memorable, fits with the story incredibly well, especially when he tenses up during the more dramatic scenes.
And at 5:45, precisely, he did it. It sure was a terrible place that he hid it. Keep up your courage now. Never let it sink. Things are getting better. Much better. I think.
I already complimented June Foray, who voiced Cindy Lou Who in Grinch and gets much more to do here. And fun fact, they got Jones himself to record a few parts, a rare instance of him doing so, which I think is pretty neat.
I just don't know, sir. I never have tried.
Weirdly enough, probably the best parts of the special are when they aren't too concerned with following the book and just let the atmosphere shine on their own. The opening sequence directly comes to mind, with the speck gracefully floating across the screen complemented with Eugene Podani's relaxing score. It doesn't sound like much, but it really gets you in the right mood before the story even starts. Same goes for when Whoville is introduced. There's something about how it's presented that perfectly captures the fascination and mystery in what Horton has just discovered.
What are you, anyhow?
Not what, sir. I'm a who.
A who? You're a who?
Not to mention a few pretty amusing visual jokes here and there, like the Who's shouts literally getting stuck in the clouds, and how the kangaroo has to whip out her glasses in nearly every shot she's in.
Me too.
On the whole, it does feel like Horton Hears a Who is unfortunately kinda stuck in the Grinch's shadow, especially with this being the only other special to go to Chuck Jones' team at MGM. And even though it just can't live up to its predecessor, I think they did a dang solid job. You're not going to come out with the feels per se, but it's pretty charming and enjoyable all the same. Check it out, its voice, much like the Who's, deserves to be heard.
There'll be no more talking to who.
No more talking to who are not.